The door opens by itself, just an inch, like the house exhaled. A sealed envelope waits on the threshold, humming with a single name. Somewhere behind the blue glass pool room, the lights flicker, then decide to stay on. Whose breath comes back when a house finally tells the truth? Before we cross that line, join Twisted Case. We restore names, not myths. Subscribe now so you're here when the next door opens. Indiana summer sits heavy on 156th Street. Cicadas grind the air thin. The Tudor facade at Fox Hollow Farm throws confident shadows across a too-green lawn, as if geometry could guarantee goodness. Cars passing outside slow for a look, not because they know, but because privilege makes its own weather. Stillness, deference, that soft hum of being above suspicion. A family is inside, following a calendar that pretends days don't bend. School runs, grocery lists, pool chemicals, payroll. Order is its own alibi, until it isn't. He called himself a businessman, and the town agreed. Secondhand stores with a frugal ring, Save-A-Lot. The kind of name you hear once and file away next to patience and coupons. Profits went thin, tempers went sharp. Daytime absences stretched, yet the performance held. Husband, father, provider. The neighbor who waved from the mailbox and kept conversations shallow. He curated a plainness that read as safety. You know the type. The smile balanced just right, the handshake firm enough to end questions. On some weekends, one of his kids slipped into the woods behind the house. The trees gathered quiet in thick handfuls, blotting out the suburban rhythm. Under leaves and damp dirt, the ground was a story that hadn't decided how to speak yet. When the skull rolled into view, everything should have stopped. Instead, the narrative adjusted. A neat explanation arrived. Something about medical teaching skeletons, and the grown-ups chose the answer that let the sun keep shining. A threshold crossed without anyone naming it. Downtown, the circle pulsed under neon. Laughter pooled on wet sidewalks after summer rain. Bars thumped their own heartbeat in bass lines and glass on wood chatter. Men left with strangers like young people do when the night grants permission. Some didn't come home. Flyers curled. Hairline cracks formed between official assurances and a mother's intuition. The phrase "missing adult" did its quiet damage in police reports and hallways where no one wanted to be the first to sound alarmist. Time rounded the edges. In family kitchens, the unanswered phone became a piece of furniture. Paychecks still needed cashing. Holidays still arrived. Private investigators taped timelines over green bankers' lamps while shadows scaled the wall behind them. The case began to feel like humidity, always there, hard to point to, easier to ignore until it settled in your lungs. From today's vantage, we can say the summer of 1996 snapped the picture into focus. A consent to search while the homeowner was away. A line of deputies and anthropologists stepping into the trees. Trowels tapping. Sifters rattling. Blue tarps breathing in the heat. Bags labeled "Unknown" filled a table faster than words could keep up. Thousands of fragments, many burned, some crushed, all insisting on the story that the house was done hiding. He drove north. Lake air is a different kind of quiet. Pine instead of cicada, dunes instead of cul-de-sacs. A note gestured towards stress and marriage and business, skirting the new vocabulary rising from the soil back home. A gunshot turned a courtroom into a permanent hypothetical. The man was gone. The house remained. The evidence remained. The families remained with their breath held for decades. By the time Fox Hollow's front doors closed to tour buses and spectacle, they had become symbols as much as wood. A promise that opened one way and locked the other. Every threshold in this story is a moral instrument. Every doorbell is a wager. Hindsight cue. Only later would we understand how the ordinary staging, the thrift stores, the polite wave, the winning lawn, masked a second life that met people in the dark and turned their names into ash. If you believe closure is a right, not a luxury, be part of this. Subscribe, leave a thoughtful comment, and share your local resources for missing person advocacy. We use our platform to amplify families, not headlines. The procedure started like it always does. The language wore lab coats, grids, datum points, controlled collection, chain of custody. Press briefings stayed careful. With fragments this damaged, identifications might be impossible. No villainy in that caution. The 1990s had limits. DNA needed cleaner samples than the fire had spared. The suspect's suicide added a brutal constraint. No interrogation, no trial, no chance to test a story against cross-examination. We will keep trying, officials promised. Families stood at the back of the room and learned how to live with the word unidentified. But even official stories creak when the hinges take on weight. Disappearances clustered near the same downtown bars. A private investigator mapped patterns that the wider system took too long to connect. An alias repeated, a car described, a license plate that led back to a mailbox in Westfield. The skull in the yard wasn't an isolated artifact from a doctor's closet. It sat in a field of disarticulated lives. Burn pits told combustion. Handcuffs told control. Shallow burials told haste. The thrift store facade was thinning just as the disappearances peaked. Coincidence is camouflage until it isn't. Technology crossed its own threshold. What the mid-90s couldn't lift, modern labs could coax into view. In 2022, the coroner's office reopened the door for families. Send us your DNA. Let us try again. The pitch was modest on paper and radical in effect. Each cheek swab made an argument against oblivion. Each submission said a quiet sentence out loud. He mattered. The investigation tilted from passive custody to active restoration. Was it really that simple? A new tool? A new will? And the past gives up its dead? Or would the house keep lying? One phone call? One kit arrives in the mail? One swab across the inside of a cheek? One profile hums in a server? One label changes from unknown male to a family name. After that, nothing can go back. 30 years after a young man vanished, the coroner's office calls a relative first, then another, making sure the circle of care is ready for impact. The name is Alan Lee Livingston. He was 27. The announcement lands weeks before a mother's final hospital bed goes quiet. Timing like that is not a headline. It's an answered prayer delivered by paperwork and patience. In the evidence room, someone writes a name on a bag, and the room feels changed. Not theatrically, but at the bone-deep level where families collect themselves. Outside, rain pins silver needles into the gravel. The mansion looks almost apologetic. A trick of light that doesn't survive the next blink. Another fragment yields a profile. Another family answers a caller ID with hands that won't stop shaking. The name is Manuel Resendez, 34 when the world last saw him. The announcement carries context. The property gave up around 10,000 pieces, and the true count of lives could reach beyond what the press dares to number. We will not treat those counts like scoreboards. We will treat them like the outline of a cemetery map. The coroner's office runs cool on purpose. Evidence refrigerators hum like a low choir. Each identification makes the room warmer anyway, as if a public institution could feel human again by saying a name out loud. A third success from the reopened campaign strengthens the discipline. Jeffrey A. Jones, 31 when he disappeared in 1993, returns to the record. Advanced sequencing carries the profile across the gap. Genealogical research threads it into a family tree. The letters J.A.J. replace U.M. on a bag. Somewhere, a doorbell rings. A relative steadies themselves on the counter's edge and understands that grief in the present tense is different from confusion in the subjunctive. The house on 156th Street absorbs another August, indifferent but not invincible.
Daniel Thomas Halloran joins the line. He is a father in the mouths of his kids again, not a rumor in the town's back channel. His daughter, Coral, speaks softly about the turn her story takes, from abandonment to bereavement. The distinction sounds technical to outsiders. It changes oxygen for the people who live it. The coroner's staff, practiced now in this choreography, time the words carefully. They slow down at the right syllables. They invite questions twice. They never rush the goodbye. Porch lights pop on across Westfield like votive candles that didn't ask permission. The office brings on partners at no cost to taxpayers, proof that a resourceful community can stretch capacity without sacrificing ethics. Volunteers trained in genetic genealogy push threads forward. New cousins say yes to swabs. Old records get reread with sharper eyes. A local paper prints a roster of 10 public names and another paragraph about the profiles still waiting. The line between unknown and known gets thinner with every careful, documented yes. For decades, the refrain served as a shield. Too burnt, too small, too mixed to ever speak. That shield is obsolete. Not every fragment will return a name. Many will. The pivot is moral as much as technical. We no longer decide what is possible by what used to fail. Back in the day, he taught a kid to knot a tie. He scolded about grass height. He signed receipts with a tidy flourish. Downtown, he moved like a rumor with a car and a false name. The Venn diagram overlapped in the only place that counts, a house where promises went to die. Once you see the overlay, the pleasant suburban man stops reading as a character and resolves into a practice, a set of tactics that weaponize normalcy. We're not in the mansion now. We're at a different Indiana door. On the porch, a deputy with a business card beneath a paperclip, a sealed envelope, and the posture people learn in academy, training to make grief feel heard. The house dog barks once, then lies down. The door opens the rest of the way. What name is returning this time? On a wet August night, the office stays bright too late, air conditioning punching back against humidity. Printers tapping the steady metronome of forms, email chimes stacking in a narrow rhythm as lab confirmations arrive. And then a clerk, hands clean, corners squared, lays out 10 manila folders in a clean row on the same table that once drowned in unknowns, aligning each with a fragment number and a family contact sheet. And for the first time since shovels cut Fox Hollow's soil in 1996, the story can be told without euphemism, without guesswork, with names resting exactly where silence used to sit. A name returns the breath. We can state the record without romance. In 1996, Fox Hollow revealed a killing ground. The suspect died by his own hand in Canada before charges or a defense could be spoken in court. The first wave of identifications, limited by the tools and budgets of their hour, named several men across the late 1990s and early 2000s. Decades later, in 2022, the county reopened the work using advanced DNA and genealogical methods. Since then, more names have come home: Livingston, Resendez, Jones, Halloran, bringing the publicly known count to 10 as of late summer 2025. With additional profiles waiting for relatives to say yes. That's the ledger. Quiet, stubborn, true. Zoom out one more notch. There's a social geography to who gets believed and how fast. In the 1990s, prejudice lived in the file folders as much as it lived in the streets. Men leaving gay bars were too often coded as voluntary disappearees. Families had to perform respectable grief just to earn urgency. The new work doesn't erase that context, but it can correct the record by adding names where apathy once wrote blanks. The house on 156th Street still stands. Sunlight still lays its stripes across the drive each morning like nothing ever happened. The pool room's blue glow still paints the air strange at dusk. The house is a set now, a facade in the cultural imagination. But wood remembers. Soil remembers. Paper remembers most of all. Identity in America runs on documents, consent forms, chain of custody logs, CODIS entries, and court-stamped death certificates. In the end, closure arrives as paperwork heavy enough to hold a ritual. We end at the monument where names are cut into stone. Fingers trace grooves. Someone wipes dust with the heel of a hand. A relative sets down a photo inside a plastic sleeve. Polaroid glare, thrift store dress shirt, a smile we refuse to let the house take a second time. The sound here is wind. No score, no narration, just that soft rustle of leaves, figuring out how to move again. The suspect is dead. No jury will read counts. No sentence will be served. Yet laboratories, volunteers, and a county office are investing real resources to return names to families, work that can't punish but can heal. If public resources are limited, where should a community lean harder? Toward identification and remembrance, funding DNA, genealogy, and memorial practice so every possible name comes home, or toward prevention and protection, pouring the same dollars into nightlife safety, training that interrupts bias, and early missing protocols that stop the next case. Argue your side with reasons, not volume. If you've lived this from the inside, your story matters here. We'll pin the most constructive comments and route ad revenue from this episode to both an ID Lab fund and a prevention nonprofit, selected from your suggestions above.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe for more gripping true crime breakdowns, mysteries, and criminal psychology stories, only on Twisted Case.